Good morning. My name is Van Ambrose. I'm Vice President of Foundations for National Church Residences, and I've been privileged to be a part of this organization for the last 21 years. It's also my wonderful privilege to introduce Betty Glenn to you this morning. It's safe to say that Betty has known John Glenn, affectionately known to all of us as JRG, probably longest than anyone else in this world. From their youthful days in Chicago, while she was a student at the Conservatory of Music, and he was studying in ministry at McCormick Seminary. They met, and then there was a breakup. 57 years later, John found Betty again. They were married in 2002 on Betty's 80th birthday. John and Betty moved to Bristol Village in 2006. A hospice client at that time, John's health improved immediately as soon as he arrived back at his home in Bristol Village. Betty now resides at Bristol Village alone, but she loves it. While John was running National Church Residences, Betty sold real estate on the north side of Chicago and was a professional musician in Chicagoland while also raising a family. Please welcome to our conference, Mrs. Betty Glenn.
First, I must thank you for this privilege of speaking to you on the subject, a man and his love for a village. I suppose it's a part of a speaker's privilege to start their message with a joke. It's supposed to relax your audience. I don't know what it does for the speaker, but anyway. Story about the fellow who comes to work in the morning and he's so distraught. And his partner says, "Why are you feeling this way this morning?" And he said, "Well, my wife backed the car out of the garage this morning." Partner says, "Well, isn't that normal? Doesn't she do that every day?" He said, "No, because I backed it in there last night." Or having a breakfast, what an opportunity to tell my favorite restaurant joke. And that is about the two guys who come in for coffee, and the waitress comes up to them, and they say they each want a cup of coffee. And the one guy says, "Now, and I want mine in a clean cup." So she's gone. She comes back again with the cups in each hand, and she said, "Which of you guys wanted the clean cup?" It's an old one, but so am I. It's very easy for me to speak about a dream, to speak about a man that I loved, and about my beloved Bristol Village. For the 11 years that I've been Mrs. John Glenn, I've had a love affair with those acres in Waverly. When I was first introduced to this place, this heavenly place, I called it Ohio's Brigadoon. For many times, I have called it Ohio's best-kept secret. Now, unlike Brigadoon, which only made an appearance every 100 years, this spot in Pike County has gone some 50 years and more and still remains a secret to thousands of people who, if they would come to see us and visit for a bit, they might say, "Why have you kept this place undercover for so long?" The night before I came here, I met a gentleman from Chillicothe who had been there for 21 years, and we got talking about Bristol, which I usually try to bring up in the subject as much as I can. And he said, "Oh, that's just a place for old people." And I said, "Well, I wish you'd come and visit us." And he promised me that he would do that. Now, I'd like all of you here who don't know or have never been to our Brigadoon to come and see us. And if you can't come and see us, the best thing to do is to find us on the web. And because most of you have a pen or pencil with you, I'm going to give you an internet website that you've all got to do. You've all got to go there. And it's so easy. You just Google B as in Betty, V as in victory, R-E-S. Couldn't be easier than that. B-V-R-E-S, and voila, you're in Bristol Village. We want you to click on the word videos. And in in this section, you click on a virtual tour of Bristol Village. And you'll just be enchanted as the rest of us are. And if you don't want to do that, you can go to the railroad, click on the video for the Railroad Club, and visit our wonderful garden railroad. This exhibit alone ought to bring hundreds of railroad enthusiasts to our village. Then you could go to the campus map and really get a full view of what we are and what we have to offer. And if you tell others about this, they will be so happy that you've let them in on this little secret place in southern Ohio. We need more introductions to our place, for if more people would meet the people of Brigadoon, they would also get in on this magic. John Glenn dreamed a dream one day, a dream that had been nurtured and fed for many, many years before it became even a remote possibility. Like a man who dreams dreams of a perfect marriage, finding the ideal wife, or an outdoorsman who is looking or dreaming for the perfect fishing hole. John, for many years, had a dream for a place for people who wanted a secure, happy retirement without all their life savings being taken from them. It had always torn at his heartstrings, and I really mean that. This man suffered whenever having to call on an old person who was lonely or isolated or wanting. And he prayed so hard for God to give him an answer. Now, millions of men have dreamed dreams, and many have had fulfillment. My precious husband's dream was shaken to reality one day when reading the Columbus newspaper. He found the tiniest little ad that said that the FHA had decided to sell the Bristol homes in Pike County, and that subdivision would be sold to the highest bidder. Coincidence? No way. I don't believe in coincidences, because I have seen God's hand at work in so many mysterious and wondrous ways. John took action. I called it his farmer frame. For if those of you who knew my John knew that he was a wonderful, big man with a booming, melodious voice. He put down that newspaper, cut out that little article, went right to the telephone to call and tell other people who he knew would be of interest. And the wheels began rolling. That village of 300 and some houses had no idea what was going to hit them. For when John Robert Glenn set his heart on something, it was bye-bye sanity. It wasn't very long that he ordered a hitch to be soldered to the back of his beautiful white Cadillac. And then to that hitch, he attached the most awful-looking old wooden trailer anybody ever saw. And that was so he could take supplies down to Waverly. And the people in Waverly still talk about John R. Glenn's awful, messy truck and all the things, or trailer, and all the things he brought down. One of the things was he loved jonquils. Our yard was so filled with jonquils, we looked like a field. And he brought jonquils down for all the corners in the village. And one of the men finally said, John, we got a barn filled with jonquil bulbs now. I think we've got enough. And he was so hurt because he kept thinking, I got to bring more and more and more. So money was needed, and also trust from people that hardly knew John. Back to my farmer, John. John took me on a tour of the Glen Farms in Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania. Took me to the one where he had been born, to one that he would worked on, and the other relatives. Now, John, for 3 years of his college life, was taking courses in animal husbandry and farming because he wanted to be a real fine agriculturist until the Lord tapped him on the shoulder and wanted him for the ministry. So one day when he took me on this tour of all these wonderful farms, the one thing I noticed was that every farm was built up against a high hill. The hills of Slippery Rock are just beautiful, and they were all built almost into the hill itself, and they were way below the roadway. And John loved this. John commented on this. And then one day I found in a letter that John had written, he wrote, "There is a high hill blocking Bristol Village from Route 23. You know," he said, "that's really making my village a valley." And he loved that perception of a village in a valley. I think this when I go to John's grave site, for he's buried on a hill overlooking a beautiful valley in his beloved Pennsylvania. Oh yes, John loved the village. He loved Bristol Village. And after we moved there in 2006, John having to go in and out of the nursing homes, our tradition at Bristol, our marvelous traditions at Bristol. May I tell you, he arrived at Traditions, the facility, in an ambulance. And when the ambulance pulled up to the door, the driver came out and he said, "This man is not ambulatory." He said, "He can't walk a bit." But Mark from our therapy department said, "We don't use that kind of language in Bristol Village. We don't use that word, can't." And they did, because they had John up walking that afternoon on a walker. We are so proud of our therapy department. But when John could be home on Oak Avenue where I lived, I would put him in the van at night and I would drive him up and down the streets of Bristol Village. He just loved that. It was always toward evening, and he would always remember the rough pavement back in the days that he first looked at this village, weeds growing everywhere, now replaced with beautiful gardens, trim lawns, and lights twinkling in the windows, and a village filled with joy-filled residents. I used to put a CD in the player so he could have background music to his tour, and it was always the song, "Can You Feel the Love Tonight?" John loved that one. And Johnny loved a book written by Joyce Landorf called Balcony People, for he felt he was surrounded by balcony people. He so often said, "I have the immense joy and supreme satisfaction of having lots of people leaning over the balcony, cheering me on and on." Now I gotta tell a joke. It's one I like. This is a packed theater, and it was gonna be a real big show. And the ushers are going up and down the aisle, and they see a fellow sitting in one seat, and he's leaned over to the next seat. And he's all disheveled, and his hair is all mussed up, and it looks like he's got a broken arm. And the usher said to him, "Hey, sir, we're going to be a packed house tonight. You can't take up 2 seats. You're leaning over, he said. And anyway, where did you come from? And with all he could muster, the guy looked up and he said, from the balcony. So this is one fan leaning over too far. John would continually say, this work has to go on. It must go on as God sees fit. Truly, as John had loved the balcony people, we still have balcony people. We still have these wonderful people of Bristol cheering us on, truly the encouragers. God bless those balcony people. There's 2 stories I have to tell you. After our wedding, after John and I were married, he wanted me to meet some of the National Church Residence Board that he liked so well, some of these men. So the first one was Eddie Matthews, and we went down to Naples, Florida, and we met Eddie Matthews, and we met him at a restaurant. And as we proceeded towards Eddie, and John hugged him, and John said to him, Eddie, I want you to meet the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And Eddie turned to him and he says, you mean Tom Slemmer's here? And then another time, we were with another board member, and we had met him for lunch, and we had spent this. John couldn't wait for me to meet him and for him to meet me. And all through the meal, they had talked, and 2 men particularly, and at the end of the meal, Chad got up and he said to me, you know, I'm sorry, we've been here 2 hours, and all we've talked about are the wonders of Tom Slemmer. He said, someday I'll talk to you about yourself. He said, right now, this is all we talked about. But Tom, dear, I love you so much, and John loved you beyond words, and I'm always happy to share your accolades and your accomplishments. So Tom is always with us. Because a man dreamed a dream and had a remarkable vision, we have a glorious place to live. I pray that God will bless Bristol Village, and as the words of a beautiful old song, keep it safe by night and day, and bless those walls so firm and stout, keeping want and trouble out. And the last line, and my last line, and bless the folk who dwell within, keep them pure and free from sin. Bless us all, that one day we may live and dwell, O Lord, with thee. And bless you all, and bless Bristol Village. Thank you.